Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week. This, like I mentioned, is the Movie Pit Podcast, where we talk about all the noteworthy big movie news items that came out this week, as well as the trailers that came out this week, and the movies that are coming out in theaters this weekend for all your viewing pleasures. Now, before we get to the podcast, I want to mention a couple things. One, I want to apologize for the last 2 weeks. There has been no podcast for the last 2 weeks. Just things keep popping up, and it's just been affecting the way I've recorded. And I want to apologize for that because, we're so close to episode 100, and which, first of all, is a whole other thing that I can't believe I'm getting to, but there's just a couple things. There's just been things and few things here and there that have gotten in the way of me recording. So I want to apologize for not having podcasts the last 2 weeks, especially if you follow the Facebook and the Twitter page. Which, if you do, thank you. If you don't, go do that, please. That really helps me out. But yeah, links to that are down below in the description/show notes area if you want to go check those out and go like them and follow them. I'd really appreciate it. But if you're following there, I did mention that I was going to do an Avengers spoiler-filled discussion review podcast, and I haven't done that. I was supposed to do it last week, but I didn't do it, and I was supposed to have people on, but things just kind of got in the way. I still am planning on doing that. I know Avengers has been in theaters for a while now. It's been 2 weeks now, almost 3 weeks now. So that's a podcast I don't want to do by myself. So I want to have people involved, and I got some people involved already that want to do it, and hopefully we'll get to do it sometime, not this week because I'm leaving town this week, then the week afterwards. So hopefully you guys will hear that by month's end for sure. But mainly I just want to apologize for not having podcasts the last 2 weeks. That's it's something I don't want to make a habit of, because I love doing the podcast. So secondly, usually when I obviously have a break in between podcasts, I always like to talk about the movie news items that came out within essentially that week and the week before, of course, because there's always movie news items coming out after I upload the podcast or things that I would love to talk about. That will not be the case this week because there was a lot of movie news items that came out, obviously within 2 weeks. That's a crazy amount of news items to go through and pick out and discuss. So instead, I'm just going to talk about the movie news items that came out this week, and one particular news item that came out over the weekend. Just for the sake of my own sanity and not having this podcast be almost 2 hours long. Because 2-hour podcast for just one person, let's face it, probably something you're going to skip over. So, and that's something I probably shouldn't be saying out loud since it is my podcast, but that is who I am. So anyway, let us go to this week's movie news items. But of course, like I mentioned, there was one news item that I wanted to mention that came out over the weekend, and that was Rambo 5 is in the works, and Sylvester Stallone is eyed to return. So yes, after years in development and a rumored plot that came out last year, actually I think it was 2 years ago, a fifth installment of the popular action franchise Rambo is back in development. The movie will be shopped around at Cannes, or it is being shopped around at the moment at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival, with a projected start date in September of this year for release date sometime next year. In addition to that, franchise star Sylvester Stallone will come back to play John Rambo and will also work on the script, but he is not expected, at least at the moment, to direct the movie. Moreover, Millennium, who are the rights holders, released an early synopsis that reads like this, saying, quote, "When the daughter of one of his friends is kidnapped, Rambo, who has been working on a ranch, crosses the U.S. and Mexican border and quickly finds himself against the full might of one of Mexico's most violent cartels." So the franchise, for those of you who are not familiar with Rambo, started all the way back in 1982 and spawned 3 sequels, with the last movie coming out in 2008, which was simply called Rambo. And Stallone ended up directing that one. He has co-written all of all of them, all the Rambo movies, but he's never directed any of them, which I find, with the exception again of Rambo in 2008, which I find fairly weird because he's directed all the Rocky movies, but he hasn't directed all the Rambo movies, which whatever. Anyway, back in 2016, Stallone actually said that he was retired as the character, so the character was going to be retired. And then last year, there was reports and stories circling that Millennium was developing plans to reboot the franchise, or doing a kind of passing of the torch movie, so they would bring back Stallone for like basically kind of a cameo role and give the new guy the new Rambo name, but that looks to no longer be the case. Stallone is currently working on Creed 2, so it's probably suggested that he is going to finish working on Creed and go to work on Rambo, because again, they want to start filming sometime in September. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that. I will definitely do that for you guys. It's been a very long time since I've seen the original Rambo movies. I've seen Rambo, the fourth one, because it was on TV recently. And I ended up watching it, and I thought it wasn't that bad. But I haven't seen the original ones, the ones that came out in the 80s. So I have to go back and check that out. But what's another action franchise gonna do? I mean, come on, it's Rambo. Why not, right? Sylvester Stallone, can see him back in front of the camera. It's always fun. All right, so that was just the only kind of real noteworthy news item that came out over the weekend. There was a bunch of stuff that came out of Cannes, or out of Cannes, however you want to pronounce it, but I don't want to talk about that because it's usually just a lot of movies getting picked up by distributors and stuff like that. So, and that's kind of stuff that will change along the lines, and sometimes people don't really care about, because as long as they see the movie on the big screen, that's all that matters to them. But if you are, a big fan of that, then there's a lot of that up online. I just don't want to go through a lot of it because it's kind of overwhelming sometimes, the news items that come out of Cannes. All right, so let's move on to this week's movie news items, and of course, as always, here on the Movie Pit Podcast, we start off with trailer talk.
Coming soon to theaters.
So we got two trailers that we're going to talk about right off the bat. There were some other trailers that came out, and all the trailers, by the way, will be linked down below in the description / show notes area. Ooh, a bad sign if I'm already slurring my words. It's a bad sign. But all those trailers are linked down below in the description / show notes area if you want to go check them out. We're not going to talk about all of them, but they're all down there that came out this week. So besides the two that we're going to highlight here on the podcast, there was a trailer for American Animals, which is a new movie with Evan Peters, which is kind of a heist movie. It's just watch the trailer. That's one of those movies where you just kind of have to watch the trailer to see how you want to gauge it. But there was that. There was a trailer for the buzzworthy film Searching with John Cho that's been getting a lot of love on the film festival circuit, and reportedly takes place entirely on a computer screen, and you can kind of see that on the trailer as well. And there was a new short trailer for The Incredibles 2 that came out. It's about a minute long. It's probably just a glorified TV spot, but it was very, very cool, and it was very good. You get to see a little bit more of Jack the baby in the movie, so there's that if you want to go check those out. But the two trailers that we're going to highlight on the podcast this week, the first one is the new trailer for the upcoming spy action comedy, The Spy Who Dumped Me.
In a moment, everyone is going to start shooting. They all want what you've got, and they'll kill each and every one of us until they get it.
Oh my God. God, I killed someone! I killed someone! Stop yelling!
What are we doing? Are we gonna sit in the corner all night? It's your birthday.
I'm 30 years old. I wear a Hawaiian shirt to work. My boyfriend dumped me in a text.
Let's set a shit on fire.
Burn, burn, burn in the fire.
In a bad situation.
We just want to talk about Drew Thayer. He's your boyfriend, right?
Drew is CIA.
Like a bad reputation.
I'm sorry, what? I know you're a spy.
It's a long story, and I'm going to explain everything.
It's in your forehead.
Some bad people are after me, and now they're after you.
If we don't deliver this package, Vivian, a lot of people are gonna die. Do you want to die having never been to Europe? Or do you want to go to Europe and die having been to Europe?
Why are those my only two options? Is this really happening?
Yeah, because you dated a spy.
Come here.
Oh my God. Oh my God!
An international terrorist group is planning a series of assassinations. A lot of innocent people are going to die unless we stop them.
Will you trust us to help you?
Light it up.
This is surreal, and I honestly think I'm in shock.
Colin, you are incredible, and I want you to own it.
You have a real instinct for this.
I do play a lot of video games.
This is insane.
Have you ever felt so alive?
Just don't die, okay?
Oh my God!
Because I would die without you, and then we'd both be dead.
You better work, bitch.
Oh my God.
Oh God! Jesus! What happened?
You too, Miles.
What? You're the boss, and yet you have not sacrificed 1 ounce of femininity. That is the Beyonce of the government.
The movie stars Mila Kunis as Audrey, a woman who, after getting dumped, finds out that her ex-boyfriend is a spy for the CIA, and that gets pulled into the crosshairs by a Delhi assassin and a British agent. She then teams up with her best friend, played by Kate McKinnon, and head to Europe to get a mysterious package. And of course, hilarity and action hijinks ensue. The pairing of Kunis and McKinnon actually really works. It looks like they have great chemistry in the trailers, and the first trailer that came out, it was okay. It was one of those teeters where I was like, yeah, I guess I'll go watch that. That seems pretty. I'll probably have a fun time. This one got me a little bit more excited. Again, the chemistry between Kunis and McKinnon is great. It looks like it's not gonna take itself too seriously, which is always a plus. But execution, of course, of this plot will be key for this movie. But it looks pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. It was one of those movies where I was like, yeah, I guess I'll go watch it. And now it's like, no, I'm definitely gonna go watch it, and it's gonna be one of those movies that hopefully I enjoy. So the movie is directed by Susanna Fogel, who has one feature film credit to her name in Life Partners. She was also the creator and directed a few episodes and written a few episodes of the ABC Family series Chasing Life. Yes, before it was ABC Family, before it got turned into Freeform. So she did that. She co-wrote the script with David Alderson, who has written for TV series United States of Terror, New Girl, Mr. Robot, and he was one of the head writers over at SNL for a few years as well. The movie co-stars Gillian Anderson, who at the end of the trailer is introduced. It looks like she's probably the head of the CIA, it looks like. And that's kind of, if you saw the trailer, and obviously I played the trailer here on the podcast, she's the little last bit with Kate McKinnon. That's who she's referring to. So The Spy Who Dumped Me opens on August 3rd. So that will come out just in a handful of months. So just look forward to that. All right, so the second trailer we're going to highlight on the podcast, and the last trailer here for Trailer Talk, is the teaser trailer for The Predator.
Tell me about the mission. Did you see anything unusual?
Like an alien, you mean?
You saw something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And your men? Someone or something tore them to pieces.
I think they're attempting hybridization. They're upgrading on every planet they visit.
We need to know if you pose a threat.
We're assassins. Isn't posing a threat kind of the point?
The movie is directed by Shane Black, who of course has directed films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Iron Man 3, and The Nice Guys. And he has a history with the Predator franchise. He starred in the very first movie. He actually also did some uncredited script work on that movie as well. He co-wrote this movie with Fred Decker, who was one of the writers on the film Monster Squad, which was a movie from the 80s that has a very big following behind it. The movie will see a young boy played by Jacob Tremblay from Room. Not The Room, not the Tommy Wiseau one, the other one, the one with Brie Larson, the serious one, who accidentally brings the Predators to Earth after he gets a piece of their technology. When they try to track him down, he's put into protection by a crew of ex-soldiers led by his father, played by Boyd Holbrook. He was one of the villains in Logan. He was also on the first 2 seasons of Narcos, and a scientist played by Olivia Munn. As for a teaser, I know since the teaser has come out, a lot of people have been kind of on the fence about it. As for a teaser, I don't think it's too bad. The teaser doesn't excite me too much, although I am a huge fan of the first Predator movie, and just a fan of the Predator creature in general. But the trailer itself, it was a teaser. I keep saying trailer. It was a teaser. It was a teaser trailer, and for a teaser, it did its job. It gave you just enough to wait for another trailer. For me, personally, I can see why people probably wouldn't like it, because there's a lot of people out there who have been burned by Predator movies in the past, like Predator 2, although I know there's defenders of Predator 2 out there, but I personally did not like Predator 2. And then, of course, there was the Alien vs. Predator movies, which were not that great, and then Predators, which came out, when did it come out? It's at least over 5 years old now. But that one with Adrian Brody, where it took place like on a Predator planet or a Predator gaming reserve or something like that. And I didn't mind that one. It had some redeeming qualities about it, but it wasn't all that great either. But Shane Black, obviously, again, like I mentioned, has a history with the Predator franchise. He was in the very first one, and he has promised this movie. It goes back to the roots of the first one. Obviously, it doesn't take place in the jungle. It looks like it's taking place in suburbia. It does look, very briefly, if you pay really close attention to the trailer, it does look like it takes place, at least one part will take place on their ship. There was reports that they did reshoots on the movie to up the ante on the final act of the movie that was having some troubles, which, whatever, I know reshoots is a dirty word, but I've mentioned multiple times here on the podcast, reshoots should not be a dirty word to anyone anymore in Hollywood, because that's just commonplace in Hollywood now. But I'm excited for it. I mean, it's got a pretty decent cast. I mean, I'm not totally sold on Boyd Holbrook, but that's just me personally. Only having seen him in Logan, I haven't watched Narcos. I'm actually going to start watching Narcos soon, because I know I'm like behind on all of it. Jacob Tremblay is very good. Olivia Munn, when she's given the right material, she's great. You also have Sterling K. Brown in there. You have Keegan-Michael Key in there, which is interesting, but I'll buy it, since it was Shane Black that casted him, most likely. You have Trevante Woods in there. He was from Moonlight. He plays the adult main character. Alfie Allen from Game of Thrones. You have Jake Busey in there, who, of course, his father, Gary Busey, was in... Is it his father? Yeah, it's father. Gary Busey, who was in Predator 2. So I think he actually is playing the son of his father within the movies, in this movie as well. Ivanka Stravosky isn't from Chuck. She's in this movie. I think she plays Jacob Tremblay's mother in the movie. And you have Thomas Jane in there, of course, played the Punisher in this movie. He was also in The Expanse on Sci-Fi, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So it has a pretty great cast. I'm really excited for it. It's just the teaser was very 50-50, and I'll admit that as well. But we don't see the Predator too much. We get a brief, really good glance of him within the trailer. It looks like it changed the design a little bit. You also get that little bit in the trailer where it says that they've been genetically modifying themselves, which is very interesting. Shane Black did an interview where apparently the government has known about the Predators for a long time, so when the ship crashes, they have kind of their own little plan, and it looks like there's going to be some kind of twist in the movie, apparently, according from like interviews with the cast and Shane Black himself. So we'll see how this movie turns out. Will it be good? Obviously, it's still up in the air. Am I going to go watch it opening weekend? Hell yeah, I am, because I'm a nerd and I like these movies, so I'm going to go watch it. So The Predator will open on September 14th this year, so we'll definitely talk more about that when we get closer to the release date. And that's it for the movie trailers. Of course, at least at the time of this recording, like I mentioned earlier, the movie news gods will release something after I upload the podcast. So if anything drops, obviously it will go up on the Facebook page. So let's move on to this week's movie news items. So some really quick movie news items before we get to the main bit. Bruce Willis will play Mike Tyson's trainer, Cuz D'Amato, in a movie called Corner Man. That was announced earlier this week, so there is that. The movie will be directed by Rupert Friend, who plays Quinn on Homeland, and he also played Agent 47 in Hitman, Agent 47. So he'll be making his directorial debut with that. And the $6 billion Man loses its director, Damien Chiffron. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I could be wrong about that. He has left the project. He also co-wrote the script for the movie. He reportedly left due to creative differences, but according to Deadline, there was another report that said he maybe left due to a language barrier, which would be really dumb if that was the case. But yeah, so the $6 billion Man has lost the director. And yes, it is based off the 70s show, The $6 Million Man. Obviously, they have to make him a $1 billion man in this day and age. The movie will be led by Mark Wahlberg and does have a release date of May 31st next year. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see if they keep that release date now that they've lost a director. So those are just two very quick movie news items I want to mention before we get to the main hub this week of movie news. And we're going to start off with the Hitman's Bodyguard is getting a sequel. That's right, the box office action comedy hit Hitman's Bodyguard is getting a sequel, and the title for that sequel will be called The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Yep, that's a mouthful. The movie is being described as a, quote, the good, the bad, and the batshit crazy, unquote. Although there is no script available yet, Tom O'Connor, who wrote the first movie, is coming back to work on the script. And it is believed that Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson will return as their roles. And given the title of the movie, it is assumed that Salma Hayek will also return, since she played the wife of the hitman in the first movie. She was the wife of Samuel L. Jackson's character. And again, if you don't remember anything, Ryan Reynolds plays a bodyguard for hire, and he is supposed to be protecting Jackman's hitman character from being killed before he can testify against the dictator, who is played by Gary Oldman in the first movie. Director Patrick Hughes, who directed Red Hill and Expendables 3 and the first movie, is also thought to be returning, but nothing is confirmed just yet. All that said, it will probably be a while before we hear anything about the movie, unless they fast track it like crazy. But I was a huge fan of The Hitman's Bodyguard. I actually really, really enjoyed it. And the chemistry and the casting of Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson just really, really worked. So if you have not seen The Hitman's Bodyguard, I highly recommend you do. I believe it's actually playing on cable right now on one of the movie channels like Cinemax or Showtime or something like that, or HBO. It's playing on one of them. Highly recommend you watch it. It's a lot of fun. It really is. Alright, so let's move on to the next movie news item. Sherlock Holmes 3 gets a release date. That's right, after the long will they or won't they do a Sherlock Holmes 3 movie with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. They being, of course, Warner Brothers, the studio that releases these movies, have announced a release date for Sherlock Holmes 3, which will be December 25th, 2020. That's right. I just have to wait 2 more years to get it. So, and yes, Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law will return to play Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. However, not returning, at least at the moment, is director Guy Ritchie. Now, Ritchie has directed the last 2 movies, but his name was not in the reports for the release date. The last Sherlock Holmes movie, of course, which was Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows, opened on Christmas Day, the same kind of release date, in 2011. And like previously mentioned, the third Sherlock Holmes movie has been in development for a long time, because, 2011, 2018, or 2020, since that's when they're releasing, it's a very long time. In fact, it was actually back in 2016, I'm sorry, that Warner Brothers and Downey Jr.'s production team created a writer's room with Nicole Perlman, who wrote Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel, Gary Whitta, who wrote The Book of Eli and did some work on Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and Genevieve Dorwit Robertson, who wrote Tomb Raider. They were all hired by Warner Brothers to map out a story. Obviously, nothing came of it, but it was obviously 2016. It was 2 years ago. Warner Brothers has been very high on trying to get this movie made, but with all the scheduling and everything, and I guess not finding a story, they're finally gonna get to do it. Now they do have a writer on the movie now. His name is Chris Brancato, and he will write the script for the third movie. He's mostly stuck to the TV side of stuff. He's written episodes for The Outer Limits. Netflix's Narcos, we talked about earlier, which he also created, and he's also written some episodes for Hannibal, that was on NBC. And movie-wise, he's directed, or wrote, I should say, the crime drama Hoodlum with Lawrence Fishburne, Melissa Williams, and Tim Roth. He's also written Species 2. So those movies all came out in the early 90s. So it's been a while since he's been in front of the camera in Hollywood, or behind the camera. Why do I keep messing up? Oh, that's right, because it's me. But anyway, Sherlock Holmes 3 finally coming out. It will have some competition at the box office, though, in 2020, as Avatar 2 will come out on December 18th, finally, and Illumination Entertainment's sequel to Sing will come out the same day on the 25th as Sherlock Holmes 3. So maybe one of those things will move. Obviously, it's 2 years from now, so we'll see what happens. Here's an interesting news item that I was originally not going to talk about on the podcast, but I left it in because it's just one of those movie news items that you read and you're like, but why? Friday Night Lights is getting another movie, and it already has a director lined up. But anyway, let's get to this little bit first. Universal Pictures is developing another reimagining of Friday Night Lights, and they are eyeing David Gordon Green, who directed Pineapple Express and has directed the upcoming Halloween movie, to direct the movie. He's only being eyed. He's not officially signed on, so there's that. The movie will not be a sequel to the 2004 movie with Billy Bob Thornton that was directed by Peter Berg, nor will it be based off the hit NBC TV series that was led by Kyle Chandler, even though there was rumors that said that the studio was looking at doing a movie, not necessarily a TV movie, but just a movie in general about the NBC show and bringing back Kyle Chandler. But yeah, that's I don't know. So the property, for those of you guys who don't know, is actually based off a real thing. It's based off a nonfiction book about a high school team in Texas, and it was brand new high school teams. It took place in 1988, and it was this brand new team in Texas that were very good, and they made a run toward the state championship. If you've not seen the 2004 movie with Billy Bob Thornton, I highly recommend you do. There's a lot of people in there that you would recognize now. The TV show was very good. I only watched the first season. I think just because I fell out of it because I was watching so many other things at that time. But I heard it was very good. It ran for like 5 seasons, and I think it got saved at one point from being canceled. It got another season, but then unfortunately it got canceled anyway. But yeah, it's interesting. They want to do another one of these, and apparently Universal is going to, it's the same story, but it's a completely different setting with a new cast of characters, but it will still be, focused on the world of high school football in Texas and the impact it has on the community. So that's interesting. I mean, I just wanted to bring that up because it was one of those movie news items, or I read it. I was like, why make another Friday Night Lights movie? It's weird because it's like, you can do anything else with this property, but you want to do another movie based. I don't know. It was weird. Anyway, moving on. Let's just move on. Margot Robbie has talked about Birds of Prey, and there was one little bit that every kind of news item has been sticking to, and I'll tell you that within the news item. So the DCEU, obviously, it's a chicken with its head cut off, and it's not stopping Warner Brothers and DC Films from announcing movies left and right about whether or not we like them or not. Anyway, one of them is Birds of Prey, and there's been different Harley Quinn movies in development in the pipeline that we've all talked about. There was the Gotham City Sirens movie, there was the Joker Harley Quinn movie. The Birds of Prey has always been the one that is stuck out and been the one that it seemed like Warner Brothers has wanted to do from the get-go. Last month we talked about this. Kathy Yan was hired to direct the movie, and Christina Hodson, who has written Bumblebee and took a first draft basically of Birds of Prey and Gotham City Sirens, was hired to write the script for this. So now Harley Quinn herself, Margot Robbie, has shed some light on what her hopes for the movie will be. So Robbie has done some interviews for her new movie coming out this week called Terminal, which we'll talk about a little bit later, obviously. And she talked about Birds of Prey. Obviously, it popped up and it came up. So Robbie noted that she spent 3 years on the project now, having pitched it while filming Suicide Squad in 2015, saying, quote, "I pitched the idea of an R-rated girl gang film, including Harley, because I was like, Harley needs friends. Harley loves interacting with people, so don't ever make her do a standalone film. She's got to be with other people. It should be a girl gang. I wasn't seeing enough girl gangs on screen, especially in the action space, so that was always a big part of it," end quote. So the comment, that comment, and she made another comment, but that particular comment was the one that stood out. That was an interview with Collider.com, and then Robbie spoke to Moviephone and said this giant tidbit. First, she confirmed that she wasn't involved in the other potential Harley Quinn projects, and her focus has always been on developing Birds of Prey with Christina Hodson. So actually, this is a rather long quote, but I pretty much summed it up for you in that little bit that I didn't even think about it. But yeah, she basically said that she wasn't involved in those other movies, and Birds of Prey was always the one that she wanted to do. And she said this though: "I kept presenting it to the studio until they felt it was at the point where they were ready to do it, and now we're all in." So there you go. So Robbie's still on board for Birds of Prey and the Harley Quinn spin-off train, and I guess it's gonna be rated R. It's gonna be a tough sell for the studio, especially considering you can get away with a lot in a PG-13 movie nowadays. But the fact that you want to make a Harley Quinn movie rated R and take away some of your fan base, probably not the best idea, but we'll see how that turns out. If they do make it rated R, kudos to Robbie for getting a studio to do that and getting behind that, but we'll see what happens. Of course, the main question is, will fans turn out and will they actually like the movie? That's a whole other thing. So let's move on, and it's kind of still related to Margot Robbie in some way. Not Harley Quinn, but Margot Robbie herself. Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has added some more names. So Quentin Tarantino's next film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, has added some more names to his cast, and some of them will be familiar to you, especially if you watch a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies. To recap, the story takes place in Los Angeles in 1969, at the height of hippie Hollywood, and follows Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a former Western TV series star, and his longtime stuntman double Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt. Both struggle to make it in Hollywood they don't recognize anymore, but Rick has a very famous next-door neighbor in Sharon Tate. Now, the movie has been referred to as the Pulp Fiction-like tapestry, I can't speak now, of stories, so it looks like Quentin Tarantino will go back to his roots before his long-talked-about plans of retiring after his 10th movie. FYI, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his 9th movie. And yes, the movie will talk about and will touch on the Manson murders, which sadly Tate was a victim of. So who's joining the cast, you may ask? Well, according to Deadline, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, Kurt Russell, Margot Robbie, and Burt Reynolds have all joined the film. Robbie, who was rumored to join the movie when the news broke out last year, has officially joined the cast and will play Sharon Tate in the movie. Madsen, Roth, and Russell will play small roles, although what roles they're playing have not been set at the moment. As for Reynolds, he's in talks to play George Spahn, and Spahn, I think I'm saying his last name right, was a real person at the time. He was an 80-year-old near-blind man who rented his LA ranch out to be used as locations for westerns. And Charles Manson convinced him to allow his followers, him and his followers, to live on the ranch in the months before they murdered Tate and 6 others. In exchange for rent, Manson would actually tell his female followers to sleep with Spahn and also serve as his guides, basically. So it's very interesting, very twisted in its own right, and seeing Burt Reynolds play that character should be interesting. I guess. Then later this week, it was actually today when it dropped this morning on Friday. Timothy Olyphant has been reported to be in negotiations, although there's no word yet now if he'll be playing a real life character or a real life person or a made up character for the movie. Of course, Tarantino loves working with people he's already worked for. There's no exception. I mean, the only exception here is that Robbie, Reynolds, and now potentially Olyphant are the only people he hasn't worked with. And of course, the movie hasn't started filming yet, so there's still probably roles to be left. I would not be surprised if Samuel L. Jackson just randomly pops up in the movie for no reason, because that's who we expect now. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like I mentioned, will start shooting soon and will open next year on August 9th. And we'll obviously talk more about that when they start shooting and next year when the movie comes out. Alright, let's move away from that to the next movie news item, which is Marvel's Captain Marvel has added Annette Bening. So this is pretty cool. So Marvel is currently filming Captain Marvel at the moment, and they've just added a big name in Annette Bening, which Captain Marvel will actually be her first comic book movie ever, which is great. Details on who she is playing are being kept secret, but the Hollywood Reporter says that her character is a, quote, scientist, and then Variety came in later and says that the scientist is probably most likely Carol Danvers' mother. Now, Carol Danvers, for those of you who don't know, is being played by Brie Larson, who ends up becoming the titled character of Captain Marvel. So the movie itself will follow Danvers, an Air Force pilot whose DNA fuses with an alien DNA, sending her into an intergalactic adventure. The movie will take place in the 90s, and we'll see some previous Marvel Cinematic characters return to the big screen. Samuel L. Jackson will come back to play Nick Fury, a two-eyed Nick Fury. There's some set photos of him with Brie Larson where he has his two eye. He doesn't have his eye patch, so he has his two eyes in the movie. Clark Gregg will return to play Phil Coulson, which is awesome. And Guardians of the Galaxy villains, Jumon Hansu's Korath and Lee Pace's Ronan will return as well. Captain Marvel will also bring back the Kree, which Ronan is a part of, to the big screen, and also introduce the fan favorite alien species and one of the most formidable villains in the Marvel comics and maybe now potentially the Marvel films, the Skrulls. The rest of the cast is filled by Jude Law, Gemma Chan, McKenna Grace, and Ben Mendelsohn, who was the villain in Rogue One and recently the villain in Ready Player One, and has played the villain a lot of times because he has that face. Very nice person from the interviews, but he's always playing villain. Anyway, the movie will be directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who have directed Half Nelson and Mississippi Grind, and Captain Marvel will open next year on March 8th, just a few months before Avengers 4. Avengers Infinity War. It's still the feels are still there, guys. If you haven't watched it yet, first of all, what the hell? Shame on you. Shame on you for not watching it yet. Anyway, this is great. Annette Bening, she's not usually known for doing her studio movies. Annette Bening has always done a lot of independent movies, a lot of indie movies that have come out. So she doesn't really do a lot of big studio movies anymore. So this is a major get for Marvel. And obviously it was something enough to entice her to come in and do her first comic book movie ever. So that's a major get for them. I really like that. That was really cool. Alright, so let's move away from Marvel and potentially move on to the DCEU again with a movie news item that should be taken as a huge grain of salt. And I know it doesn't make any sense, but I'm still going to say it. It should be taken as a grain of salt, a massive grain of salt. And that is that Peter Jackson is eyeing a return to either Middle-earth or directing a DCEU movie. That's right, because the man that bought Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movies to the big screen is eyeing either going back to directing or being a part of the Lord of the Rings series or potentially directing a DC movie. Now, this news comes from theonering.com. And according to them, Peter Jackson is deciding between working on the Amazon Lord of the Rings series or directing an unnamed DC superhero movie. Now, either move would be interesting because Obviously, if he goes back to Amazon's The Lord of the Rings series, he's going back to something he knows very well, and some fans probably won't be too happy about it, considering that a lot of fans were not hyped up about the Hobbit series. But I mean, he did give us The Lord of the Rings, so there is that. But if he goes the DC route, this won't necessarily be his first comic book movie property. He was a producer on The Adventures of Tintin, which is based off a comic strip, which Steven Spielberg ended up directing. But moreover, he hasn't directed a movie since The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, which came out in 2014. Now, he has a World War II documentary lined up, and he is attached to direct a sequel to The Adventures of Tintin, but that has been in the works for a long time now, and there's no real big movement on that happening anytime soon, unless they're filming it in secret, and then they drop a trailer like all of a sudden, which would be very interesting, but I don't see that happening. Either way, he's got one movie to his name coming up, which is The Mortal Engines. He serves as a co-writer and a producer on that, and that also happens to be based off a book by Philip Reeve, and that comes out later this year. But again, he only co-wrote it, and he's a producer on it. He didn't direct it. Now, all of that said, the question would be, if he does go the DC route, what would he be directing? We know Steven Spielberg is directing a movie off the comic Black Hawk, and Ava DuVernay is directing The New Gods, but both movies are not connected to the main DCEU movies. They're not connected to Batman and Wonder Woman and anything like that. They're their own little universe, like the potential solo Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. That is not part of the DCEU story, or even Birds of Prey, like you mentioned earlier. So he can either do one of those movies that are not connected to the main storyline, or he can do one of the offshoots, like what DuVernay is doing and Spielberg is doing. Or maybe he'll direct a movie that's within the timeline, like within the timeline of maybe like a Green Lantern, or maybe Black Adam with Dwayne Johnson, or something else. I don't know what else he could end up potentially doing that would make sense, but this is interesting. I mean, again, it's a grain of salt, because it's a rumor. We don't know anything. It feels from the report that it looks like it's up to him whatever he wants to do. So if he doesn't do Lord of the Rings, then maybe he'll do this, and obviously he'll have to talk to Warner Brothers and see what they want to do, and they'll probably ask him like, hey, do you want to do something? He's like, yeah, I want to do something, and then they'll give him a list of the things. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't see Peter Jackson as a comic book director, but you kind of forget, because he's obviously he's done 6 Middle Earth movies, and I mean, he has done other movies. He's done King Kong, he's done The Lovely Bones, and he did something else that I can't think of now, but he has directed other movies. But you think of Peter Jackson, you're like, oh yeah, the Lord of the Rings movies. That's all you think about. Like, it's just in your head now. So I don't know what he could end up potentially directing if he goes the DC route. And if he goes with Amazon and he goes with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I don't know what he's going to do. Like, is he going to direct episodes, or he's only going to direct one episode? Will he direct a pilot and then maybe the season finale? We don't know. And Amazon has already gone full in on Lord of the Rings. I think they've it was 5 seasons or something ridiculous like that right off the bat. So I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see we'll see. Obviously, the ball is in his court, and all the questions should go to Peter Jackson. All right, so let's move on to another little news item that's not confirmed or official in any sort of way. It's just something that's come out, and that's the reason why Colin Trevorrow got fired from Star Wars Episode 9. Maybe. We don't know. So fans are obviously still debating whether or not they like Star Wars The Last Jedi, and that's just gonna happen. Whenever. But with Solo, a Star Wars story coming out later this month, the focus will now go to Episode 9 in the franchise, which will be directed by J.J. Abrams, who of course directed the first of this new episodes, The Force Awakens. However, before Abrams was attached, it was supposed to be directed by Colin Trevorrow, who has directed Jurassic World. Now, he was hired to write and direct the movie, but after 2 years on the movie, he was removed from the project last year in September. Now, at the time, it was reported only that it was creative differences why he left. But this new report came out from the Wall Street Journal that gives us a little bit more. Now, according to them, Trevorrow did pitch an idea to Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy, Disney president Alan Horn, and Disney CEO Bob Iger, who that essentially got him hired. But when Trevorrow and his frequent collaborator Derek Connolly got to work on the script, Kennedy wasn't happy with the drafts he was turning in. Lucasfilm then hired Jack Thorne, who was one of the writers on the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child Broadway show, to write the script, but both Kennedy and Trevorrow didn't like that drift either. So after Thorne's draft, Trevorrow wanted another turn at the script, but Kennedy decided to fire Trevorrow instead and move on. That led to Abrams coming in. However, Abrams wasn't the first choice after Trevorrow was fired. According to the Wall Street Journal, they did consider on bringing back The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson, but there weren't any real serious discussions, and Johnson wasn't eager to return with a set release date for Episode 9, which was something that he has publicly said after The Last Jedi came out. Obviously, that was on top of all the decisions that he was defending that he made in The Last Jedi. So there you go. It wasn't something scandalous. It wasn't something that Trevorrow did that Kennedy didn't like. Well, sort of, anyway. It was truly creative differences, and at the end of the day. So either way, Abrams will be directing the new episode, Episode 9, with Chris Terrio, who has who wrote Argo, and he redid one of the drafts for Batman v Superman. They're writing the script together. Now, Solo: A Star Wars Story opens again later this month, and Star Wars Episode 9 will open next year on December 20th. Now, Lucasfilm obviously has a history with directors. You know, it's very well known that they fired Phil Lord and Chris Miller from Solo only weeks left before initial filming was done. Now, so by the way, Solo has already premiered, and the early reception for the movie is relatively positive. Everyone's saying it's a little tough and rough at the beginning, but once everything starts rolling, it's supposed to be a lot of good. It's supposed to be a lot of good. It's supposed to be really good. And supposedly Alden Ehrenreich nails it out of the park as a young Han Solo. But obviously those are just early reports, and those are the people that got to see the movie. Obviously they had to watch it again to see what it was. And obviously there was no real reviews coming out because the embargo is still up for Solo: A Star Wars Story. So the question for this is, obviously, you know, Trevorrow pitched the idea that they really liked, and there was a rumor that went around, and this is a bit of a, I guess, spoiler warning if you haven't seen The Last Jedi, that apparently Trevorrow wanted to keep Luke Skywalker alive, and that was one of the reasons why him and Kathleen Kennedy butted heads. That was not the case, because the report says that was just a rumor that was started by a fan that somehow got out there and everyone kind of picked up on it. That was not the case. But there were things obviously that Trevorrow did that Kathleen Kennedy didn't like, and thankfully it got to the point that he left and that she fired him before they started filming, unlike what they did for Solo and Phil Lord and Chris Miller. So there is that. It's pretty much what we've heard before, but now we officially know what the reasoning behind them leaving was. So there is that. Alright, so this is pretty interesting. G.I. Joe's Snake Eyes could be getting his own movie? So one of the most popular G.I. Joe characters, Snake Eyes, I know he's one of my favorite characters, is getting his own movie. Paramount Pictures is developing a Snake Eyes movie with Beauty and the Beast writer. I'm going to jack this man's name up. And I apologize to you, sir, if this podcast gets to you. Evan Spilotopoulos? Maybe? I don't know. We're just going to refer to him as the writer from this point on. Is in talks to tackle the script. So Paramount Pictures already has 2 G.I. Joe writers under his belt, or under their belt, I should say, with the 2009's G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra and 2013's soft reboot of G.I. Joe Retaliation, where stuntman and actor Ray Park played Snake Eyes in both of those movies. Now, for those unfamiliar with the character, for whatever reason, Snake Eyes is the one dressed in all black, and he never reveals his face, and he never speaks. And he has a dog that he takes on his solo missions called Timber. So his main rival is Storm Shadow, and he's the ninja all in white, who works for G.I. Joe's rival villain Team Cobra. Not Team Cobra, just Cobra. Now, the 2 characters, depending on which origin story you want to follow, are either blood brothers, or they are like brothers who grew up together learning the ways of the ninja. Now, this is interesting on 2 occasions. One, a solo Snake Eyes movie would be really, really cool because he's very, I mean, I can totally watch it, and it could totally make sense that there would be a solo Snake Eyes movie. And also, we don't get a lot of ninja movies nowadays. I don't know why that is, and ninjas are always cool. I don't know why. But anyway, 2, Paramount has been wanting to reboot the G.I. Joe franchise recently, so maybe this could be their way of doing so by starting off with one character, especially one as popular as Snake Eyes. Obviously, they would have to, you know, if this is their way, if this is their lead-in into a G.I. Joe movie, Snake Eyes would be really cool. So maybe he would already be part of G.I. Joe, or maybe it would be kind of an origin story of sorts, and it would follow him on his own little mission. And then at the end of the movie, G.I. Joe's like, "Hey, we got an open spot for you," and then that's how we lead into a G.I. Joe movie. That's just me thinking out loud, but I can see them potentially doing that if this is their way of trying to reboot G.I. Joe. I don't see them doing a movie for every G.I. Joe character, because that would be, or every character they want to be in the movie, because there's a lot of G.I. Joe characters, especially a lot of Cobra characters. So I think maybe this would be a good way of kind of doing that. But this is really cool, and I totally would be behind this. As for the writer, because I'm not going to say his name again, he got his start in animation. He worked for Disney for quite a few years, working on their animation straight to DVD movies before he broke off and started writing his own movies. He was one of the writers on the Dwayne Johnson-led Hercules movie that came out a handful of years ago, and he was also one of the writers on the Huntsman's Winter's War, which was the sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman. And he went back to work with Disney for the live-action Beauty and the Beast movie, and he was also hired recently to write the sequel to Netflix's Bright. So he is an up-and-coming writer in his own right, and what better way to put your name out there with Beauty and the Beast, which was kind of a good in-house connection because he was already working with Disney, but also to be the man responsible for bringing one of the most popular G.I. Joe characters to the big screen in his own movie. Because despite what you think of the G.I. Joe movies, and even though Rise of Cobra was not very good, the best parts of that movie were with Snake Eyes. And G.I. Joe Retaliation, even though I liked it more than the first one, and I think I've enjoyed it a lot more than other people have, because people just don't like the G.I. Joe movies, although I thought G.I. Joe Retaliation was actually way far more superior than Rise of Cobra, which is not saying much, because Rise of Cobra was not very good, but G.I. Joe Retaliation did have some faults, but one of the best standout sequences in G.I. Joe Retaliation was the sequence with Snake. Anytime Snake Eyes was on screen, that was the best part. And there was a standout sequence with him on a mountaintop with all the ninjas, and that was the best part of the movie, and that was one of the most promoted aspects of the movie, because even they knew Snake Eyes is one of the most popular characters in the G.I. Joe history, and people probably want to go watch a G.I. Joe movie, want to watch Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow fight each other. So this would be a great way to do that, and I'm all but looking forward to having this movie. I want this movie now. I hope they fast track it, because I want to see this movie on the big screen. Alright, so let's move on to the next movie news item, which is very exciting. We're getting into the last bits of the movie news here. These are the last 2 news items that we'll talk about here on the podcast. The first one is Jordan Peele's next movie gets a title, a release date, and a cast is already getting together. Now, of course, Jordan Peele became a massive household name after his feature directorial debut for Get Out, which was a hit at the box office. and everyone has been waiting to see what he'll do next, when he'll get behind the camera again. Well, our movie prayers have been answered, as this week Peele took to Twitter to reveal the first poster for his next directorial effort. Plus, we have an idea on who will be joining the cast. So the movie will be titled Us, and Peele will not only be directing, he will also be writing the script. And details on the plot are being kept secret, but it is said that the movie will center on two couples, one white and one black. But who will play those potential couples? Well, reports say that Black Panther co-stars Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke, who played M'Baku in Black Panther, for those of you who need to be reminded, will play one couple, and Elizabeth Moss, who is on the Hulu show The Handmaid's Tale, will play one part of the other couple. Now, that said, Duke and Moss are in the early stages of joining, while Nyong'o is already in negotiations to join. Now, there's no word yet on what the approach of the movie will be. Obviously, we can assume that it will touch on some sort of social commentary like Get Out did. Peele made it very well known that his movies that he wanted to do would touch on something that is relevant to what's going on in the real world. So we can only assume that Us will be something like that as well. But what exactly it is, we don't know. I mean, we can kind of maybe start to theorize on what that is. Obviously, with one black couple and one white couple, what's going to go on there, we don't know. So we'll have to wait and see. Only time will tell. Thankfully, the movie, even though it's coming out next year, it's a long ways away, but at least we won't have to wait too long. Us will open on March 15th, 2019. So it's still a ways away, but it's not too long. And obviously, with a cast like that, at least an early look at what the cast could look like, it's pretty good. Alright, so let's move on to our final movie news item of the week, and that is that Bill and Ted 3 is officially a go.
Yes! 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 Yes!
That's right. After years of saying it was closer than ever to happening, it is actually finally happening. Bloom announced this week that Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter will return to play Bill and Ted for the third Bill and Ted movie, which is titled Bill and Ted Face the Music. Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, who created the movies, have written the script, and the movie will be directed by Dean Parasot, who directed Red 2 and Galaxy Quest, which has actually been on a lot lately on TV. So if you've not seen Galaxy Quest, I highly recommend you do, because it is very good and it is very funny. So go watch that, because it's very good. Anyway, Reeves and Winter released a joint statement saying, quote, "We couldn't be more excited to get the whole band back together again. Chris and Ed wrote an amazing script, and with Dean at the helm, we've got a dream team," end quote. With the announcement was actually a rather lengthy synopsis that read like this. So bear with me on this one. Quote, "When we last met Bill and Ted, they were time-traveling teenagers trying to pass history class and win the battle of the bands. Once prophesied to save the universe with their rock and roll, now middle-aged and with the responsibilities of family have caught up with these two best friends who have not yet fulfilled their destiny. They've written thousands of tunes, but they have yet to write a good one, much less the greatest song ever written. With the fabric of time and space tearing around them, a visitor from the future warns our heroes that only their song can save life as they know it. Out of luck and fresh out of inspiration, Bill and Ted set out a time-traveling adventure to seek the song that will set the world right and bring harmony in the universe as we know it. Together, with the aid of their daughters, a new crop of historical figures, and some sympathetic musical legends, Bill and Ted find much and much more than just a song." You have no idea. You won't notice in the editing, but you have no idea how many times it took me to read that thing. Anyway, Reeves is currently filming John Wick Chapter 3, which I believe started filming this week, which comes out next year, and will also And we'll also have another film coming out called Destination Wedding, a romantic comedy with Winona Ryder. Winters, on the other hand, has mostly stuck behind the scenes, since Bill and Ted. He's directed a documentary called Deep Web. He's actually directed a lot of documentaries, but it looks like one of the main ones is called Deep Web. He's directed TV movies for the Cartoon Network show Ben 10, and for your YouTube savvy people, he directed the movie Smosh, the movie. So there's that. The movie currently doesn't have a release date, but the last Bill and Ted movie, Bill and Ted Bogus Adventure, was released back in 1991. So long ago. Anyway, I don't know why I said that last bit. Anyway, there was an interview with Ed Solomon later on. He spoke with, I believe he spoke directly to Collider.com. There's a link to that down below in the description/show notes area. He goes very in depth into what the movie will be about, and obviously not spoiling anything, but he goes very in depth of what kind of the theme will be. He does talk about how the daughters of Bill and Ted will play a massive part in the movie. So it's a very, very cool interview, very, detail heavy. So if you want to go read that, you can. I'll link that down below in the description/show notes area so you guys can go read it. Obviously, this is a big movie news item because Bill and Ted, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the news story, it felt like especially recently, every year, it was like, we're getting closer and closer to the movie finally happening. Keanu Reeves wants to do it, and Reeves will only do it if Alex Winters want to do it, and Alex Winters was like, yeah, I want to do it, and then both of them want to do it, and now they're just waiting for the studio they're wanting to do it, and waiting for a script for it to happen, and now we're here. Now we're here. Both of them have signed on. They have a director. They have a script. They have a long ass synopsis, and now they're just waiting for schedules to clear up and for them to start filming. I think this is really cool. And obviously, if you've never seen the Bill and Ted movies, I will wholeheartedly say I've not watched them in some time. But if you've not seen the Bill and Ted movies, I highly recommend you do. I can't wait to see what they do with this one. And obviously, they're going to play up the age factor, and they have kids now, and they have wives. Apparently, in the interview, I think if I remember in the interview, Solomon said that their wives were like, their wives were like, I don't think they were supermodels. I think they were like medieval princesses who now work like double shifts at like a diner to pay out. I just found that funny. So it's so go read the interview with Ed Solomon. It's very good. But this is something that many fans have been waiting for, and then now for it to be finally happening is really cool. So there you go. That's all the movie news items that came out this week. Again, at least at the time of this recording. Obviously, if anything big drops, I will post those. I will post that movie news item up on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/moviepit. That's facebook.com/moviepit. There is a link in the description/show notes areas for you guys to go click on that. So movie news is done. Trailers are done. Let's move on to the last bit of this podcast, which is this week's movie releases.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Alright, so we have a couple limited releases coming out this week. One of them is Revenge, which is led by Matilda Lutz. And the synopsis reads like this: never take your mistress on an annual guy's getaway, especially one devoted to hunting. A violent lesson for three wealthy married men. This movie's been making the rounds a little bit at the film festivals, starting up, and everyone's saying it's a very bloody movie. Some people are saying it's actually pretty good. So again, it's a limited release, so check your theaters for that. That's Revenge. And the second limited release this week is Terminal, which was the Margot Robbie movie we mentioned earlier. The twisting tales of two assassins carrying out a sinister mission, a teacher battling a fatal illness, an idiomatic janitor, and a curious waitress leading a dangerous double life. Murderous consequences unravel in the dead of night as their lives all intertwine in the hands of a mysterious criminal mastermind hell-bent on revenge. The movie stars Margot Robbie, like we mentioned, Simon Pegg, Matthew Lewis, Dexter Fletcher, Max Irons, and Mike Myers. Yes, Mike Myers is in the movie. I think from the trailers, I think he is actually playing the janitor. So it should be interesting. And Margot Robbie plays like this very femme fatale kind of character. Simon Pegg, I believe, is playing the teacher in this synopsis. And Matthew Lewis, of course, from Harry Potter fame, looks like he's playing like a henchman for one of the main bad guys. So yeah, I saw the trailer not too long ago. It's getting a very limited release. I think it's pretty much coming out on video on demand as well. So just be on the lookout for that movie. It is coming out this week. I know it's coming out I believe in next month overseas. So if you're an overseas listener, be on the lookout for Terminal, not this week, but in the next month or so. So there you go. All right. So your wide release this week, both mother heavy, since it is, of course, Mother's Day weekend. This Sunday. So the first one is Breaking In. A mother, played by Gabrielle Union, takes her 2 children on a weekend getaway to her late father's secluded high-tech estate in the countryside. Soon she finds herself in a fight to save her children from 4 men who break into the house in search of something. So this is it's rather interesting. I saw the trailer. I've seen the trailer a couple times now in theaters, and the first time I saw it, I was like, I'm not really interested in this. And then I saw it again, and I was like, you know what? It's been a while since we've seen Gabrielle Union on the big screen. Why not? And then I saw it again the third time, the final time, not too long ago, and I was like, yeah, I guess I'll go watch that. You know, I'm not overly excited for it, but it's interesting, you know, to see. You know, she's not a superhero. She's not like a spy or something. She's just a regular person. She's just a regular old mom trying to save her kids. So I think that's, you know, I think we kind of lose track of that because we're like, oh, like, you know, she's obviously gonna be like a spy or something. No, she's a regular mom protecting her young kids. So yeah, why not go watch a movie like that? So that's Breaking In. And the final wide release this week is Life of the Party, written by husband and wife duo Ben Falcone and Melissa McCarthy. And Ben Falcone will also direct a movie. When her husband suddenly dumps her, longtime dedicated housewife Deanna, played by McCarthy, turns regret into reset by going back to college, landing in the same classes and school as her daughter, who's not entirely sold on the idea. Plunging headlong into the campus experiences, the increasingly outspoken Deanna embraces freedom, fun, and frat boys on her own terms, finding her true self in a senior year no one ever expected. So, you know, I know there's a lot of people out there who, you know, are tired of Melissa McCarthy or don't find her funny or, you know, whatever. I can see why people would say that, but I'm still a fan of Melissa McCarthy. And even though I wasn't a huge fan of the first trailer that came out, the second trailer that came out totally turned my perspective on this movie around. You kind of know what you're getting in a Melissa McCarthy movie, and while all the jokes don't land, that's could be fair for any comedy, really. But as for this, I wasn't totally sold on it, and then I saw that second trailer, and I kind of was sold on it a little bit. It's not like, I'm expecting, the best comedy ever, but it's one of those movies where like, maybe this could be good, maybe there'll be a few solid laughs, again, it's Mother's Day weekend, so obviously this is a great movie. You'll probably see a lot of mother-daughters at the movie theater, which is, obviously what this movie's trying to do. It's aiming at that crowd, which is great. So yeah, there you go. So Life of the Party, Breaking In are your wide releases this week, and your limited release this week are Terminal and Revenge. And that's it, guys. That's all I got for you guys on the podcast this week. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast this week. Obviously, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I'm sorry for the last 2 weeks of being a no-show. That's not gonna happen again, hopefully. But yeah, again, if you want updates on when there will be a podcast or when there won't be a podcast, go like the Facebook page, facebook.com/moviepit. There's a link down below in the description/show notes area for that. You can also go follow the podcast on Twitter. I forgot what I was going to say there for a second, which is at MoviePit Podcast. That's at MoviePit Podcast. The M in movie, the P in pit, and the P in podcast are all capitalized if that makes your life easier. So you can go give us a follow over there. And what else is down there? You got the WordPress account, which is where I do my written spoiler-free reviews. I haven't written anything. I wrote something for Avengers Infinity War, which was a half spoiler-free, half spoiler-filled post up there. I won't be writing anything this weekend because I'll be going out of town this weekend. So there is that. But I will return next week over there for Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 comes out next week, so there's a little sneak preview of that, and I will be watching it on Thursday night. So you'll definitely be hearing some of my thoughts on the podcast on Friday next week. So yeah, what else is down there? You got some other stuff. You got the trailers down there, like I mentioned. If you're listening to this on YouTube or SoundCloud and you're an iPhone user and you want to listen to the podcast on the go, the podcast is on iTunes. So if you have your podcast, just open up your podcast app on your iPhone and search the Movie Pit Podcast, or you can just click the link down below in the description/show notes area and go subscribe over there. You can just take the podcast and go with you. That would be really help me. You know what else will help me out if you do that? You know what else will help me out if you're listening on the iPhone? Giving me a rating and review. It really helps with the podcast. I'm not asking for 5 stars. You know, all these other podcasts are asking for 5 stars. I'm not asking for 5 stars. Give the podcast whatever star you feel like it. As long as you rate me and leave a review, because it really helps with the podcast in the long run. And I would really appreciate it. And it's the easiest way to get a shout out in getting your name read on the internet. I mean, besides, Twitter or something. But yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you guys go do that. And what else? What else I got for you guys? Anything else down there in the description/show notes area is up for free game for you guys to go click on and go view. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Obviously, again, if anything big drops, it will go up on the Facebook, or most likely it will go up on the Facebook, but it will also probably go up on the Twitter page as well. I will see you guys next week. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And if you have a mother, don't forget that it's Mother's Day this Sunday, guys. Don't forget. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys this week. And hopefully you guys have a good week. Have a good weekend. I'll see you guys next week, where we'll talk about more movie news, more trailers, and the movies coming out. Definitely be talking about Deadpool 2. And yeah, so have a good week. As always, be safe, be happy, be good people, and go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!